what we traditionally see is if we get a shot spotter activation or a call from a citizen that there's been a shooting. Patrol officers respond 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Doesn't matter if it's Saturday afternoon, doesn't matter if it's Monday at 2 a.m. in the morning, weekend after a party, doesn't make any difference. Officers respond. The first thing you do is render aid. If the individual is already deceased, then we're setting up a crime scene and perimeter and calling in paramedics. One to check the body, check the individual. If they've deceased, that's the time and the agency that we use, our paramedics here, to determine if there is a death. The next thing is then a call out to the investigators and our forensic technicians. Forensics is going to process the scene, right? Collect the evidence, hopefully the DNA evidence, any shell casings or whatever instrument or tool might have been used to commit that murder. Detectives start getting on scene. They get kind of an update, and then they kind of divide. And I don't just bring 1 or 2 detectives to a crime scene, right? When we go to a homicide, we're bringing a force. I want to see narcotics detectives. I want to see our homicide detectives, our forensic technicians, and support staff from the precincts. So as we process the crime scene, we're also walking the neighborhood and knocking on doors. Citizens, did you see anything? Did you hear anything? Do you know anything? Who made the phone call? Are you willing to talk to the police? At least if you don't want to meet with us, could you talk to us over the phone and tell us kind of what you saw? Then we'll start to photograph and process the crime scene. If there's any shell casings, we'll be collecting those and all that forensics evidence that goes into play. Then you'll kind of see kind of a huddle up. And I'm talking here in Newport News, there's a huddle up where they will brief out about what we have. Now, anybody that does any investigations in homicide, in an hour, things change. But what do we have? What time did the call come in? What do we know? What have we seen? But one of the things we have now when we talk about technology, right? So instead of just knocking on the door, when I started, did you happen to see anything, hear anything? Did you happen to see anything? Did you hear anything? Do you have a Ring camera? Oh yeah, I saw a car drive by, or it caught part of this, or it caught an individual or 2 individuals that may have ran from the scene. That is invaluable. And citizens will allow us to look at that Ring camera footage, and often even 24 hours later when we go back and do a second canvas, did we miss anything? Fresh eyes, right? Oh, you know what, here's a business here's a business that might have camera footage, or this individual wasn't home, but my Ring camera caught this. I have cameras on the outside of my house. I was looking through it and I saw this. So that comes from having a relationship with the community, right? But it also was the technology that they have. So that's one of our processes is, are there any cameras in the area, in the immediate neighborhood? Are there any businesses that have cameras, any houses that have cameras, the Ring cameras? And then again, what did citizens see or hear? So then they start putting that together. So I will come out on the homicides and get an initial briefing, not micromanaging what the team is doing, but I want to know it's important that I'm there to support them, and I want this community to know that homicides matter to me, that a death, any loss of life matters to me. So that's what usually the first 24 hours, if there's any witnesses, we would interview them, some at the scene, and some, if they're willing to come back to headquarters, we'll sit down and interview them. If we've got some leads, it was this type of vehicle, we'll put that information out. And then the case can really go so many different directions. Now, one of the things that's challenging in a homicide case is one individual may say, oh, it was a blue car and parked at this address, and another individual may say, no, it was a red car and they went this direction. So even if we have to track all those or defunk, if you will, that information that's not accurate. So that's why I want that team out. The sergeants and lieutenants are very, very good at you guys are going to handle this section, this team is going to handle that, this team's going to handle the canvas. So there's 5 or 6 different tentacles, if you will, doing 5 or 6 different things, and then they'll come back here and brief on what we have. Who are our suspects? What is our motive? Trying to determine that is key. Is this a domestic situation? Is this a Facebook situation? Is there any information out there on social media that people are saying back and forth? What is the history? When was the last person this person talked to? Who was the last person that saw him? What is that timeline? Trying to establish that. And then we start looking at the evidence, right? So we have a NIBIN system here that when we collect those shell casings, we're able to determine if that firearm, those shell casings, were used in any other shooting or homicide in the city. Not just here, anywhere else that's in the system. We used to send that to the state lab and we get a report back, it could be up to a month or 6 weeks. Now we can do that, turn that over in about 24, 48 hours. So it allows us, these same shell casings were used in a shooting maybe in Hampton or another jurisdiction or across the water or in another part of our own city. Well, we had 2 suspects in that shooting. We have the same shell casings. Maybe these are individuals. Oh, look, this matches their vehicle. So those type things. Then we'll usually attend the autopsy the next morning, and then there will be a full briefing from me and with our Commonwealth attorney. They usually get a call that night in the middle of the process, but then a full briefing the next morning, and it breaks down then, okay, now what are we doing? The report I get, I require them to do 3. 24-hour report, what they have done so far, what we're going to do the next 24 hours. The 48-hour report, what they have done, what's next for the next 48 hours, and a 72-hour report, what have we done so far and what's next to follow. So that just keeps us in the loop. I want to keep my eyes on and not micromanage what they do, but here's where we're at, here's the process, and what's next. Do we have any good leads? But Chief Creswell oversees, the assistant chief over our investigation division. And then we have a brief out every Thursday. We'll talk about any updates on cases, so we're keeping an eye on those things. It's important. We don't get it right all the time, but I think it's important that we call our families of victims back, that we stay in touch with them, even ones that are unsolved. I don't want them to think that their family member is a number, right? That it still matters to us, that we're still investigating that, or we've gone so far and we need this more evidence, or we know this individual saw the homicide occur, but they don't want to testify. So we've got to try to find some other way, and until we find that, we're kind of at a holding point. And families, I think if you're open and honest with them and transparent, that they understand that, but I mean, emotion plays into it. But I tell you, my hat is off to the men and women that work those cases. I think it's homicide and special victims that deals with kids, I just think are the hardest 2 assignments to do. So it's my goal to try to give them every tool that I can. And when we went through the pandemic, as we still go through it, I guess, right? People have been cooped up more. There's a lot of frustration, but I see a lot of quick access to firearms. That conflict resolution, where it might used to be a fight or an argument, now you just seem like there's a gun being introduced, and the number of casings that are recovered. I mean, people could really get hurt. I mean, it's just dangerous, right? So I'm glad that we have a 78% clearance rate right now. That's huge. National average 62, 78% clearance rate, but it's still, I look at individuals, those are individuals that have lost their lives and families that have lost loved ones. And if we just put those firearms down and find another way to resolve conflict, we'd be in a much better place.